So welcome everybody. We're just letting a few more people in, and then we'll be starting the webinar in a moment or two. Okay, hello and welcome to the first of our webinars for Word Day 2023. We're absolutely delighted that you're able to join us as we talk about supporting children and young people with rheumatic diseases in education. As you can see on your screen, we have an amazing panel who we'll hear from in a moment, but I first wanted to introduce our three moderators who are all members of the International Word Day Organising Committee. So I'll start, I'm Richard Beasley. I'm the founder and director of Juvenile Arthritis Research, which is a charity in the UK focusing on juvenile idiopathic arthritis. We undertake research, we support families affected by JIA, and we raise awareness. And it's great to be part of such an incredible initiative as Word Day. I'm joined by two amazing people who have worked really hard behind the scenes to make today happen, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Sammy.
Hi, I'm Sammy Ainsworth. I live in the UK. I work at Children's Hospital here in the north of England in the research department. But more importantly, I have a daughter who was diagnosed with lupus when she was 14. And I have been very involved with Lupus UK for a number of years now, and I'm a trustee. I've been involved with Word Day from the start, so 5 years ago now, and it's absolutely wonderful to be here to help facilitate this webinar tonight. Very exciting. Thank you. And I hope you have a good time, everybody, and find it interesting.
Thank you. Catherine.
Hello, everybody. My name is Catherine McCormack. I live in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I run an organization called Arthritis Kids South Africa. We're a patient advocacy and family support organization. And I'm also a mum to a daughter who was diagnosed in 2010 with juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And I'm absolutely thrilled to see her doctor, Dr. Gail Faller, who joins us from Johannesburg. Gail and I have traveled a long road together, and I'm always so delighted to see her. I hope you have a wonderful time. I hope it's enlightening, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. The plan for this session is that we're going to hear a very brief introduction from each of our panel members in a few minutes, and then we're going to go through some Q&A with them and discussion. If you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A box that you should see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll field them to the panel during the webinar. But first of all, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Sophie. Sophie is a young adult with lupus who has first-hand experience of living with rheumatic disease whilst travelling through the education system. And she's going to be speaking for a few minutes about her experiences. Sophie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Richard. So I'll just grab some slides and get started. Can everyone see that? Yep, great. So my name's Sophie, and I was diagnosed with lupus when I was 14. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about my experience throughout education and some of the work I've been doing since to improve the experience of other young people with conditions like mine. So I first started with symptoms in autumn of 2013. I was 14 years old and was having severe joint pain that was meaning I was struggling to walk. Muscle weakness, my hair was falling out, I was having extreme fatigue that was making it difficult to get out of bed some days. I was having these extreme breathing difficulties as well, that was really painful. After a few back and forths to my GP, I eventually ended up at the team in Liverpool, some of whom are on the call today, and I was diagnosed with lupus pretty quickly. I think from the start of my symptoms to getting diagnosed was only about 7 months, which in lupus terms was pretty quick. And And so after I was diagnosed, the next couple of years were quite up and down. I was quite unstable and had lots of different medications that I was trying out. And it took that first few years to really sort of find the right sort of concoction of medications that would work for me. I had a lot of hospital stays. I had a lot of different treatments. And it was just quite an unsettling time, with a lot of that time being spent very ill. As you can see, there's a couple of the pictures from around that time. The first one is probably a few months after I was diagnosed, when I was on a really high dose of steroids. You can see with my face being quite puffy. And then the second one was in hospital. I think I was about 18 in this photo, a few years after I'd been diagnosed. One of the things that I found when I was first diagnosed was that I had a lot of problems with my school and getting them to understand what I was experiencing. When I was first diagnosed, my mum went into the school and tried to have a chat with my teachers and explain about how the condition was affecting me and what was going on. But even though then they were sort of trying to be quite receptive and understand about it, I found that day to day I wasn't really getting the support that I needed. I would quite often have comments suggesting I was being lazy, or I would receive letters about my attendance, when in reality my attendance was bad because I was in hospital. I would be made to feel lazy that I wasn't taking part in PE when it was freezing cold outside and my joints were in agony. There was just lots of incidents where I didn't feel like my teachers ever understood my condition, no matter how many times I tried to explain it. Later on, I left school at 16 and went to college, and that was a much better experience. I had a lot more sort of personalised kind of learning plans put in place. I had a school nurse that I could talk to, and she informed all my teachers just a little bit about the condition. I think for me, what was important was there wasn't much day to day that I needed my teachers to do. All my medication I took myself. There weren't really any major things that they needed to be involved with. All I really needed was them to be understanding. I needed, access to a lift, which I didn't always have. But largely I just wanted a bit of empathy, that I was having a hard time. And so if I was maybe a little bit behind in a subject, then that was okay and I would catch up. And not to have the additional pressure that I was often put in. After that, I went to university and had quite a good experience there too. We in the UK, we have disability student support, and I found that quite helpful. And I found, for me, what was interesting was the further up in education I got, the better the support seemed to be. And I wonder if that maybe came with age, that because I was older, I was believed more. Whereas when I was 14, my teachers didn't trust me, which I found quite frustrating. And I think from more I've heard is quite a common problem, that the younger you are, the more difficult it is to be believed. Throughout my own experiences, I started the organisation RAISE. And RAISE is a charity which raises awareness of invisible illnesses in schools and education. One of the problems that I sort of identified when I was having problems in school was that I think a lot of the reason why I wasn't understood was because my condition was invisible. Whilst I was feeling really ill, I looked just like any of my healthy peers. And even though I'd gone into hospital for a few days at a time, when I came back, I looked healthy. So I think for a lot of my teachers and my peers, they would assume that I was ill, but then I would go to hospital and the doctors would make me better, and then I'd be okay again. And I think that's a reality of chronic illness that I think a lot of people who don't experience it believe, that health is kind of this problem that you're able to solve, and it's an acute issue. And the idea that chronic illness is going to go on for a very long time isn't always necessarily understood. And from this, I kind of started to talk to lots of other young people who were having similar experiences. And there's just a few stats on this side that show the kind of motivation I then had to carry on this work. So it's believed that 70 to 80% of disabilities are considered invisible. And we did a survey during the COVID pandemic that said that 80% of young people with invisible illnesses that we surveyed their conditions had got worse over the last couple of years as an indirect result of the pandemic. And it's also the fact that children with chronic health conditions are more likely to have mental health issues further on in life. So all these kind of things showed to me that something else needs to be done. And that was where we came in with RAISE. I started off chatting to Eve Smith, one of our other panelists tonight, who was my doctor when I was in paediatrics. And I told her I wanted to make resources for schools. And instantly she was really on board, and we set up a meeting with other young people from the hospital with a variety of different conditions. This is just a little bit of a timeline of the charity and how we've developed into a registered charity with resources that are launching today. And so we, first of all, had this initial meeting where we all kind of got together and had loads of other young people just able to talk to each other about this sort of shared experience of having an invisible illness and navigating school at the same time. And we came up with the idea that we wanted resources for schools, something that we could give to teachers that explained what we wanted to say. After this, we carried on with further workshops, and between groups of young people, teachers, parents, healthcare professionals, charities, we started to create this resource, and we wrote with them information pack, which consists of a booklet as well as lots of other resources that can be practically used within a school. After this, we became a registered charity, and whilst we were still developing these resources, we were invited to Parliament and the Department of Education. We've been all over the world shouting the message about invisible illnesses. We carried on with more workshops, constantly involving young people in our work. I think that's what makes us quite unique as a charity, is that everything we do is led by the young people that we're looking to support. It's not us doing what we want and then saying, what do you think? Every goal of ours, our strategy, is all led by us asking what needs to be done, what needs to change. And that has led to the schools pack finally today launching digitally for us, and we're going to have an in-person launch in Liverpool tomorrow. To show you a little bit about the pack, and this is what it looks like. It's a digital download that anyone can download from our website, and it's a lot of practical guidance for teachers so that they can better support young people with invisible illnesses. It goes through communication tips, it goes through issues to do with trust and privacy, it talks about the fluctuation of illnesses, and basically what it's supposed to, it's not supposed to be a telling teachers where they're going wrong. It's supposed to be a support resource that will show them that it's okay to not know the answers. It's okay to not be an expert in every condition, because no one is ever going to be. But it's just a reminder to have this empathy and how to support those young people who are really going to need you at that time. So we're, as well as the actual guide that comes in it, we've got posters, we've got accessible toilet signs, we've got health passports, which are to be used between the young person and their school staff, and will be a sort of practical day-to-day resource that will show, that will be able to be used and explain what they need when they need it, how they personally can be best supported. And it means that each individual's situation is dealt with on an individual basis and not as a one-size-fits-all approach. So we're really excited to launch those, and we hope that from my experiences and the experience of the other young people who've been creating this with us, we'll have made a great resource that will be practical and have real benefits to lots of young people in schools. I think that is all from me for now. Obviously we'll be around for any questions afterwards, but thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. That's fantastic. Great introduction to what you've done, and hats off to you, because I know you were doing this whilst you created RAISE whilst you were still studying yourself. So it's a big challenge. So well done. And if anyone watching has any questions, either for Sophie or for anyone else, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll come back to them in just a moment. I'd like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves now. I'll go around on my screen as I see you. So if you'd like to give a very quick introduction to who you are and why you're here, really. So Gail. I'll start with you.
Hello everyone, I'm Gail Farah. I'm a paediatric rheumatologist in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm very pleased to join tonight to be able to answer any questions if I can, and to talk about how we support children in South Africa who have rheumatic diseases in our schools. And
Oh, we've lost Gail for a moment, so we'll move on and hopefully Gail will be able to come back in a moment. Libby, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Libby Newsom. I'm a teacher in the United Kingdom. I'm passionate about accessible education. I feel it's very important that children, all children, but particularly those with long-term serious and hidden illness, can have the right access in school to make their journey through school accessible, achievable, and memorable in the right ways and fun. Frankly, I'm in awe of the parents and the children that I have come across who are supporting their children so brilliantly. I'm in awe of the children and their bravery in confronting these illnesses every single day of their lives. And I do realise that in school, it is a little like the tip of an iceberg, and we don't see the problems that you see as parents at home. So I am here to provide whatever answers I can about my experiences in supporting children in schools. But I also fully intend to learn a lot along the way and take that back to improve my practice in school. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Colleen, you're next on my screen.
Hello, everyone. I'm a principal from an elementary school in Vancouver, Canada. I have a 15-year-old daughter who was diagnosed with JIA when she was 3. So along our journey, we worked with a foundation called Cassie and Friends that started here in Vancouver, and now it's across Canada, but they held our hand and taken us on this journey in the most incredible supportive way. And we just so appreciate the work that they've done to help us. And that's where my invitation came to join you here today. I will do a quick confession, though. I am on spring break and I'm in Maui.
Thank you for joining us, Colleen.
Thank you.
Luciana.
Hi, my name is Luciana Peixoto. I'm speaking from São Paulo, Brazil. And thank you for inviting me to be here. And I collaborate with the Systemic JIA Foundation because my daughter was diagnosed with systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And also we just started a work here in Brazil with JIA patients called Join Us. And I'm very, very happy to be here joining you for the World Day. Thank you.
Thank you. And Beatrice?
Hello, you guys just met my mom. She's joining from Sao Paulo, but I'm joining from San Diego because I'm currently studying here. And I'm very happy to be here and share my opinion on my experience with school and how I feel like my teachers could have helped me better. And so.
Thank you. Delilah?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Delilah. I'm happy to join you today. I'm based in Cardiff, Wales, and I run Cardiff Lupus Group, and I'm also a board member for Lupus Europe. I was diagnosed with lupus in my teens. I had never heard of lupus before, no family, no friend with lupus. So this was a completely new diagnosis to me. And it's been 20 years since then, and I'm still learning about this condition, about lupus. But I think nowadays we're very lucky to have charities like Lupus UK, where you have access to information for people with lupus. It's not just technical information, but for people with lupus, and also for young people with lupus, which clearly can be different how you explain things. So, well, I look forward to a wonderful webinar and discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but by no means least, Eve.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eve Smith. I'm a paediatric rheumatologist in Liverpool in the UK. I'm also one of the initial Word Day organising panel members. And as Sophie mentioned, got an interest in this area, having been Sophie's doctor, but also I remember very vividly the day that Sophie said to me, so we got to the end of a clinic appointment and I said, is there anything else that I can help you with? And Sophie launched into this, age 14, launched into this discussion about how she wanted to form a charity and help people around, you know, the UK and the world. And I was really taken aback and did everything I could to help her. So it's amazing to see this as the focus for today's webinar. And I think we'll have a lot of things to learn together about how we can support children and young people in schools. Thanks.
Thank you, Eve, and welcome back, Gail. So we lost you for a moment, but you're back. I don't know if you wanted to finish your introduction.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In South Africa, we have some electricity issues and my connection just collapsed. I was just saying that we can try and share what we do to support children in South Africa in schools, including our educational outreach programs. We have a large number of leaflets and reach out that we do. We have a very nice program of enabling children to get concessions in exams, and whatever we are able to share that may be useful, we'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Gail, and welcome to all our panelists. I'm going to play a very short video now, assuming my screen share works, so bear with me a moment.
Let me tell you about JIA, juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Let me tell you about JIA. I take loads of drugs to keep it at bay. Pills, injections, physios too. Try to get me fit for school. You can't know when I'm in pain. You're probably frustrated I'm off school again. It's so much more than swollen joints. It's rashes, sore eyes, and more to the point. It's feeling I am missing out, though I don't like to fuss and shout. So please believe me when I say I'm having a bad flare-up day. My condition isn't obvious. The battle's deep inside. I don't like to admit it. It really hurts my pride. But pride, they say, precedes a fall. And what I need to tell you all is just how painful it can be carrying JIA around with me. I thought that this might help you to see JIA from my point of view. Kit Weston.
So Libby, our first question comes to you. I know that you've used that poem in your classes. What led you to use a poem about juvenile arthritis in school?
Coming across children suffering from the condition and suddenly realizing that it was a completely hidden illness and one that I didn't understand at the outset, and therefore how would I expect the classmates of the child suffering from this condition to also take on board and understand it in a way that meant they were sensitive to the individual's issues. I think the second thing was the fundamental misconception about arthritis. Children in schools tend to think that arthritis is something that granny has, that it's creaky joints. And in one case, somebody said, can't you just get new knees? It's osteoarthritis that takes sort of center stage in most people's understanding. So referencing its whole body impact and getting the children in class to understand that this isn't simply an osteoarthritic condition, and that also that it's a whole person condition, because it impacts on self-esteem and on confidence and mental well-being and general well-being. And I think I wanted the classmates to understand that. And finally, I think children do have an amazing capacity for understanding, but they need a little bit of either factual information, which I've now accessed through the JAR materials, which are wonderful, specifically the ones created for the students in school. And once they have that understanding of this condition, they have actually provided quite a good support system for the children in school with this suffering with this condition, because they feel they're contributing and helping somebody and understand that the condition that the individual's suffering from.
Hi, so I think I'm going to go next with a question. So my question is for you, Beatrix. So I always want to bring it back to the young people. If there was one thing that you would like any teachers or education professionals that are listening from wherever they are across the world, if there was one thing that you would like, what would you tell them that could help? What would, from your experience, what did you learn that might, be good to share?
I think like kind of following along what like Sophie's been saying a lot of the time is support is important, empathy is important, but pity is not really something we need. There's no point in pitying someone because that won't really solve anything. Like if we ask you for an extension, know that we're not tricking you. It's not that we didn't want to. It's not that I don't want to run around PE. It's because we can't. And I think one thing people don't really realize is when we ask for these is because we know that we are at our limit, and if we try and go beyond and do what teachers ask of us, we might end up just making things worse for ourselves, which in return will just make everything worse for everyone, basically. So I would just say be understanding, even if you don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a brilliant answer. Catherine, have you got the next question?
I have a question, and it's not one from the questions that have been submitted. It's a question I have actually for Gail, and it's juvenile idiopathic arthritis and SLE and rheumatic diseases can be completely invisible, and how wonderful in places where they can be invisible, despite all the complexity that comes with having an invisible disease. But of course, Gail and I represent regions in the world where, unfortunately, devastatingly, it's frequently not invisible. I think we have audience members from around the world, and it's true of many places. So my question to Gail is, I wonder if you have any view on whether children have more challenges where their disease is obvious to everybody, or if it's more challenging where it's invisible. And I'm talking about in a school environment. How do you support children differently? Those who have obvious physical manifestations of their disease relative to the type of support that you give to children whose disease is well managed but are potentially still suffering from invisible symptoms like fatigue and the other complications of rheumatic diseases.
Thanks, Catherine. In South Africa, we do have a dual education system, and sometimes a dual health system, and sometimes patients do reach us very late. And I have actually had experiences where children who have an obvious arthritis, who have actually become disabled, who are on crutches, who are limping, who have not yet accessed care, are severely teased at school, ostracized and excluded. And one of the things that we try and do is reach out to and help the parents to reach out to the peer group of that classroom and actually do a little presentation in the classroom, supply the child and the parents with material to do a little presentation in the classroom to help the peer group and the teacher understand exactly what their child's going through, so that they don't make fun of the children. And that happens particularly in the younger classes, where children can be teased a lot about being different. And one of my very positive experiences was to help a child prepare a presentation at a school assembly, where she was able to not only share her experiences, but do some demonstrations about how difficult it is to live as a child with a disability. And the raising of that awareness and providing the materials for her to do that really helped the school to come on board with all the children began to wear ribbons for arthritis. They began to raise money to help with arthritis. And that kind of awareness, sometimes it has to come from within the parent and the child itself, and we provide the materials and support to help the child do that kind of thing. That's been a very effective strategy for us. In some cases, the invisible kids are the harder ones, I think, because it's very, very hard for a teenager's peer group to believe that they are so tired that they don't want to come out and have fun, or that they really can't participate in PT, and they often get teased because they're getting off lightly, that they don't have to do the PT assessments. In South Africa, in our high schools, physical education is actually given a mark. It is given a grade. You can fail physical education in South Africa on the basis that you can't do what everyone else has to do. So one of the assessments is 50 push-ups, for example, in the high school. And what I've done in cases like that is I've created a handout for teachers which goes to the school. And on this handout, it's got a map. It's got a little skeleton which has got a map. And on the skeleton, it's got black points showing teachers and other people exactly where a child can be saw that you can't see it, and explaining that a child can look well and be saw. But sometimes what I've done very effectively in South Africa is I've actually resorted to excusing children by writing a full medical report and insisting that my word is taken, and that the child will be believed because I have certified to the illness and I have said these are the actual joints. And on one occasion I wrote a blow-by-blow account saying exactly which joint was affected in the child, so that the teacher could understand that this child couldn't go out and do these things, couldn't finish assignments on time, did need the writing concession. And one of the things that has been helpful in South Africa, particularly in high schools, in both government and in private high schools in the education system, there are legalized concessions where if you get a letter from the child's doctor, a medical report from the child's doctor, along with an educational psychology report to really prove that the child is ill, they are entitled to concessions under government legislation, where they're entitled to extra time for assignments, they're entitled to extra time during exams, they're entitled to rest breaks, they're entitled to take medication into venues with them. And I have done this on an ongoing basis, that I encourage every high school child in my practice to have a good look at what they can and can't do, and get us to help them to obtain those concessions, so that it's all above board and that they are never ever ostracized or told that they are actually faking it, because it's all been certified and it just makes their life a little bit easier.
Thank you, Gail. Colleen, I'm coming to you next. As you're both a teacher and a parent of a child with juvenile arthritis, so you understand from both perspectives what that involves and what it entails. How have you been able to use your experience as a parent to support families and educate colleagues into what that involves and how they can better support children with juvenile arthritis?
Richard, it was me you called on, right? Yeah, okay. So as a parent, we connected with our teachers as soon as the year began, or the term began for Caden, just making sure that we let them know sort of what, for her, attendance has been the biggest piece, just missing a lot of school. But I think what's helped a lot, and what I'm hearing from other people is a secondary voice. Because as an administrator of a school, I've also had students come in. Just last year, I had a student come to our school with lupus, and right away, all your pieces, I'm thinking in my head that we had to get teachers educated. And what I found is that secondary voice, that piece, that the booklets and materials that Sophie has created, you bring that in as a parent, you have those other voices supporting or advocating for you in another way. The other piece that I found was really important for me as an educator is when parents come to me as the administrator of the school, because we can access in Canada, we have, or in British Columbia, our system, we have different things that we can access to bring into the school to support students. And what Gail was talking about, that piece around doctor's notes and getting some documentation, we have ministry funding that we can bring in when a student has a diagnosis identified, and then that, same as Gail, brings in certain supports and expected supports for students. So I really feel, from my point of view as a mom, just going in with that voice, and the few times we've had to bring in documentation or those other voices, and then as an administrator of a school, it's I think it's important that parents not just go to the teacher. It's also, I think it's a community. Schools are a community, because kids are out, if they're young, they're outside playing. There's counselors involved. Like, I think it's important that you also speak to, depending on how your schools are organized. Ours have principals at the lead of the schools, but to include those individuals in the resources that you can bring, such as the ones, I think, Sophie, you've done such a great job. So thank you.
Hi, so I've got a question next. So this is for Delilah, because I know that you work very hard for Lupus UK, Delilah, and you're connected to so many other charities across Europe. So my question was, what do you see the role of the charities that we reach out to so often for support? What do you see the role of the charities in supporting young people within school and education?
Thank you, Sammy. Well, that's a really good question. For example, with Lupus Europe, at the moment, we have developed, with my colleagues, we have developed a support group for people with, young people with lupus. So it's an opportunity for having people from around Europe to be together and discuss the experiences they're going through. It is an educational activity for them. It's an activity also for them to gain confidence, to understand the condition and how it can affect people, young people of anywhere in the world, or in Europe, in Europe in this case. It's not limited to some area, to some place or country, or to some age as well. It can be anyone could be affected, and how you're affected. So I think these kind of activities are really important for people, young people, to get to know other people going through this, and for different countries too. It's a learning experience for them, and it's a way for gaining this confidence, which is very important for self-advocating also. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a question in that I'm going to ask a few of our panelists to answer. So quick, short answers, please, based on your own experiences. So the question is from Laura. Do you find that young people want to be open about their condition, or would they rather support was more subtle? So I'm going to ask that to Sophie, Beatrice and Luciana. Sophie first, would you prefer would you prefer to be more open about your condition, or that support within education was more subtle?
I think it depends on each individual. I think that's the main thing, isn't it? Is that each person's wants will be different. For me, when I was in school, I was quite happy to be very open about it. For me, I felt like that was going to be a more useful way to get the message across. So I remember when we first told my head teacher, he said, "Oh, okay, don't worry, no one needs to know." And I said, actually, no, they do. I do need all my teachers to know. I need, whichever class I'm going to be in at any point in the day, I need them to know that I've got lupus, how it might affect me. But I think the difference is it doesn't necessarily need to be talked about all the time. I think having all my teachers know about it and have the understanding of how I might be affected and what might be going on in the classroom, without making a big fanfare about it, and without bringing it up in front of the students, without talking about it in the corridor, talking about it in class. I think that's unnecessary, for me anyway. But for everyone to know was important for me.
Thank you. Beatrice, would you like to answer the same question? Would you prefer that your condition was kept quiet at school? Would you prefer people to know about it? And
Kind of, I'm in the same place as Sophie a little bit. When I was first diagnosed, like no one really knew. And like with time, people slowly started figuring out like that something was wrong because I wouldn't show up to school. But no, like I feel like a lot of people are scared to ask you straight up. So my teachers would like always check on me and be like, hey, how are you doing? But they always made sure not to make it like my personality and things like that. So I still had some type of normalcy outside of everything. So but it really is up to the person, because I know some people just don't like people knowing. So yeah.
thank you. Luciana, would you like to add anything different from that as a parent, and also as your role in an organisation to support families?
Yeah, I totally support their opinion. It really depends on the personality of the child. But what I have to add is that as a parent, especially for younger kids, like if they are really little, we need to tell at least the school personnel about their condition. So, and if the child is old enough and you're in doubt as a parent, if they want the friends to know about it, just ask the child. Ask them, listen, you know, you have JIA or you have lupus. Can we talk about it at school? Can we talk with your friends? But the school personnel, I think this is kind of mandatory, because it's really important for them to know about the condition and if the child's going to be absent a lot. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'll just add to that yes, it depends on the individual. In my experience as a parent, and also as someone who runs an organisation that supports children, young people with juvenile arthritis. But we've also seen a shift over the last few years. So when we first started 5 years ago, we had a few young people who wanted to share their story, and they did it anonymously because they didn't want anyone else to know. They kept very quiet. We changed their name. We didn't put their photos up. But over the last few years, that's changed noticeably. So children are telling us that because the support resources they're getting from us, they're going into school and sharing with their friends. We've had a lot of children and young people, and now adults with arthritis, with juvenile arthritis, wanting to share their story because it makes a difference to them, and they know it makes a difference to other people. And we've seen a change that more people seem to be wanting to share their story when there's support and resources and understanding out there. But you're right, it does depend on the individual. And to echo what Luciana says, absolutely do share with your class teacher or someone at the school so they can put some support resources in place. But thank you all. Catherine, did you have the next question?
I have a question, not for anybody in particular, but I'm hoping Gail and Colleen and perhaps Eve, and of course the patients in the panel might have some insight for us. There have been various times in the last 12 years since my daughter was diagnosed with JIA that I've had the humbling experience of getting things completely wrong. And I know from our parent support groups, one of the greatest challenges is trying to figure out what your child needs in a particular moment, and how to separate normal childhood stuff from disease stuff, and when to apply pressure and when not to apply pressure. And I'm hoping the people who've been trained in either teaching or treating children might have some insights. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, Ella was recovering from a series of complications. She was physically very weak. She was on 2 crutches, and she was battling to make her way across her school campus. And the school had a golf cart that the teachers used, that staff used to get from one end to the other. And the obvious solution was to let Ella ride on the golf cart. It made perfect sense. And we thanked the school and we said, fantastic solution. And it was only years later that Ella told us how absolutely awful it was to be the one child on the golf cart speeding past all the other children who were chatting and laughing and enjoying themselves, and how isolating it was, and how much she really hated it. But she was too young, and I wasn't able to express to us that she really didn't want to be on the golf cart, no matter how obvious and logical it seemed to me and to the teachers, all well-meaning. So I'm wondering if Colleen perhaps, or Eve or Gail, or any of the panel members, if you have any of those kinds of insights, or how we can tease out what our children really need and give it to them in a way that makes them feel included, as opposed to maybe highlighting the differences between them and other children.
I can speak with just complete connection to what you're saying. It's hard. My daughter's 15, and navigating those social pieces of what's right and wrong is really hard. My only thing that's really helped us is because as a mom, you have these, I feel like I'm very vested sometimes in like making sure the education is this and all these pieces are in place, and I might do what you're saying is those missteps is we have Caden with a counselor now, and so we get that balanced voice, and I meet with a counselor every once in a while too, and just it's just that other place for her to talk about how things are going, and then of course, and I know we're all doing it as best we can, but just really listening to their voice and giving them space to say it. Navigating the teens has been the most challenging for our family in like with the school attendance and social pieces and managing health and up late, making sure injections are done. It's been a challenging time, and I don't really think we'll get it perfect, but that's okay. We're doing our best.
Thank you, Colleen. Yeah, that's all we can do. We try to do our best, don't we? I've got a question for Eve. It's
sorry, we're just going to add to that if while we're still on that same topic.
Sorry.
Is that okay?
Or Sophie, you go first.
Yeah, sorry, before we moved on, I just wanted to say, I think in this situation, I think maybe one, and I mean, I'm not a parent, so obviously I don't have that perspective. And I think it's just important to know that in this particular situation, I think parents need to acknowledge that they're not then they don't know best in the situation. Parents may know what's best for their children in lots of different occasions as they're growing up. But I think in terms of navigating a new chronic illness, that's one occasion where in most cases, unless you've, got another child with the same sort of thing, or you've experienced it yourself, you aren't going to know any more than your child does, especially like for me when I was 14. So I was, old enough to understand about the condition. There was nothing that my mum knew about lupus that she knew more than me. We had the same, starting point. And so I think when it comes to how they're choosing to navigate it, how they're going about different things, and how they, want to be supported, I think they just have to be at the center of that. Everything has to be sort of, right, how do you want to handle this? And that, like Richard was saying earlier, might change over time with how much they want to be open about things and stuff like that. But I think it is one of those occasions where you can't swoop in and necessarily be, wrap your child up and suddenly make everything okay, because sadly, it doesn't work like that. And I think being able to acknowledge that is important, and learn and go through it all together.
I was just going to add to that question, Catherine's question as well, about sometimes it can be difficult to preempt, I think, everything that can happen at school. It's a bit of an uncontrollable beast, and things can happen that you just, something might happen in the morning and your child might have the whole day ahead of them and really be distressed all day. So for some young people that have been sort of going through things where they've, really struggled at school, and that's led to non-attendance, or it's led to fear of going to school, sometimes something that I've done that's helped a little bit is, with their consent, contacted the school and said, look, is there somebody that this young person could come and speak to in crisis, or that can, so maybe that would be helpful in that situation, that if they already have that relationship, they've gone on the cart and they've really hated it, and they then go and speak to that person and say, look, I really hated that, could we stop this? So I think having a link person can be really helpful, and somebody that they can go to and don't have to wait the whole day to then say it to their mum or dad or whatever. So trying to encourage the school to sort of put someone forward that can be that person.
Is there anybody that wants to add to that or anything? Is that?
I just want to. Oh.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it, Luciana. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to add what Eve said, like totally agree with you. And if they are like teenagers, they already have that link person. They already have, the teacher they are close to. And I am sure that this teacher will be like filling this place. And if they are younger, yeah, then it's a great idea.
I agree with you, Luciana. I remember when Sophie was diagnosed, just quickly, she already had teachers that she would have talked to, but then somebody in their wisdom decided to assign a teacher that she didn't know, which obviously didn't work. And you just think this was never going to work, completely illogical. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting point. So my question was sort of going to bring in Libby and Eve sort of together, because the way I sort of see it, we've all got to be a team here to support these children that are living with a rheumatic disease and trying to navigate education. So I don't know whether you want to start, Libby, but I wondered if Libby and Eve, and maybe Colleen could come in as an education professional, how together do you sort of come as a team to support our children and build that connection between yourselves?
I think it's so important to be able to communicate honestly. We're like three legs of a stool: the child, the parents, the school. And if anything's out of balance, then the whole thing wobbles and is, unusable. So it's very important, I feel, to talk about what the child feels capable of. And I think to accept that might feel different for that child as they move through a year, a day, a week, possibly, because the condition that they're bringing with them to school every day can flare up, can have changes that, unless we are really aware of it in school and that we communicate not just with the principal, but with the dinner ladies, with the people who will see them on the playground, I think it needs to be a very inclusive. Ideally, we would like to be able to share that child's story with the widest possible number of people in a school, because in that way we don't drop the baton. And I think in bigger schools, and that tends to happen when you move up into senior education and you're seeing many more people perhaps throughout the course of the day, and as you say, just make sure that child has a trusted adult that they can talk to, and that the communication with the parents is regular, it's timely, and it's very honest. I think one of the things that as a teacher makes me nervous is when I know that parents have given me a red line in the sand. This child must not do X, but as the child's getting older, they're pushing those boundaries and they're wanting to try X plus Y. And I know that their parents have told me this must not happen. And I think you just need to really make sure that the three parties communicate together so that there's a common understanding for those children to support them best as possible in school. Thank you.
Eve, is there anything you want to bring in to connect with that?
I suppose I just echo, what Libby said. It's all about communication, really, isn't it? And trying to keep communication going between school, between health, between the young person. And often we find that our nurses help a lot with that. So in terms of contacting the school, contacting school nurses, contacting particular teachers, or maybe involving like our occupational therapist, thinking more about the practicalities, about certain issues that practical things that can be done that could be helped. We've heard a lot about schools, not doing something, or not. Sometimes we also encounter schools that are almost overprotective, and the risk assessment says that this young person cannot do that thing. And actually, we also play a role in sort of trying to break down those misconceptions about what people can and can't do, and try and encourage young people to participate in everything that they want to participate in and that they should. So I think there's that role as well, is trying to encourage people to be able to access everything, really.
So Gail, is there anything as a health professional that you would like to add to anything that Eve has said?
I think it's very important that kids have a voice at school. I really do. And I love the idea of the counseling. I send a lot of my teenagers for counseling, not because they have any kind of mental illness, but because they just need someone on their side that is not a parent and is not their doctor. Someone that's just going to listen to them and help them find their voice. And that I agree totally, we must not restrict them. And it's one of the things that our handout says, that this child should be allowed to participate fully at school as far as they are able to, and they will tell you what they can't do, so that we keep them in their peer groups and allow them that complete sense of normality. And that's very important, that they have their voices. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a question in the chat, and I'm probably going to be looking at our clinicians to help with this. The question is from Natalie. It says, if your child has scarring from lupus, is there any support for them due to them being body conscious? And obviously this is within the school context, but I guess it's broader than that as well. So is there any support that's available? Because we know that if you're body conscious because of your condition and the impact of that condition, it can impact your social networks and your personal social networks, how you communicate with people, and your mental health. So Eve, can I fire that question at you? If anyone else would like to jump in, then please do in a moment.
Yeah, so I suppose the question is in relation to lupus, but it's something that we see across a number of conditions, and something that can fluctuate. Obviously, if somebody takes a lot of steroids, it can affect their appearance transiently and then can improve again. And I think, I think it's really comes down to support from the team, the wider multidisciplinary team. So thinking about our psychologists, thinking about our nurses, potentially counsellors, school, things like resilience, talking through coping strategies. There are some practical things that can be done with scarring around things like camouflage, and a lot of hospitals can actually refer people to services for sophisticated forms of makeup that can do camouflage if that's something that people want to explore. But I think it's really, supporting that young person, involving psychologists, involving the wider team, involving charities. That's where most of the support would really come from, I think, in this context. Gail, I don't know if you want to add anything. I don't know if anyone else on the panel wants to add anything.
I have a little bit to add. So from when I took a lot of steroid use, I ended up with a lot of stretch marks like everywhere. And like you can see them very easily. And in the beginning, I was like super self-conscious and did not like them, wanted to change them, wanted to remove them. Like I still feel not too well about them, but with time, it definitely got easier. And I think one thing that really echoes, and even though at the time I didn't really want to hear it, and I felt that it wasn't very fun for someone to be saying this, but it's like, it's your body's history, and so like to me, that's what really helped to hear is it's my story, kind of. And so kind of accepting that this happened also like helped me in the future a little bit. So I don't know how useful that is, but that's what.
I just want to add just one quick thing from a parent perspective. That I think these things take time, and just learning to live, and for our young people who are amazing at learning how to manage their conditions, things take time. And when I think of what my daughter was like at the very beginning and how she coped with the changes of her body, slowly giving time and giving experience and giving the support by all the right people, their friends, their family, their amazing doctors team. It was very much, I love that when you say like the three legs of the stool, Libby, that's just exactly how it is. And eventually time, hopefully with that comes a little bit of confidence to cope with the all of the things that relate to your body image with living with an illness like this. So Richard, are you going to do the final question?
Thank you. Yes, I can't believe our time is very nearly up. I will just say before I ask you your final question, we're getting comments in. There's a lot of love for all of our panelists, but particularly our two young people for standing up and making yourself be front and center, and everyone can see you and you're speaking up about things that matter. So thank you. I'm going to ask you each a final question, and you have about 30 seconds to answer it. So it really is the take-home message. So I'll start with our clinicians, I think, just to warn you. So Eve and Gail, if you could give one last takeaway message for people watching this about what difference they can make from your perspective for children in education, be it school or college or university, what would it be from your point of view? Eve first.
So what difference they can make? I think really you know, using the resources that are out there. I don't think that teachers are deliberately trying to hold young people back. I think that they just need educated. And I think, you know, getting everyone on the same page is probably the best way forward. That would be my bit of advice.
Thank you. Gail?
I agree. Don't be afraid to use what resources you can. Get your doctor to interact with your school, and don't be afraid to be a lupus warrior or a JIA warrior in school. And remember, for every child, one of my patients has a saying, "This is my normal," and I think that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Helps if I turn the mute off, doesn't it? Sorry. I'm going to ask a very similar question to our teachers and educational professionals. If you could tell your colleagues one thing about how they can make the biggest possible difference to children and young people with a rheumatic condition, whether it's lupus or JA or something else, what would your one piece of advice be? And I'll start with Libby.
I think listen to the child's point of view, talk to the parents. And I think an expression which was used by one of the other panelists, use these fantastic materials that are out there as your means of advocating for your child. If you haven't quite got the language, or you need to speak to a teacher and really get them to understand, then use those fantastic resources out there and take them with you. And I'm sure the teaching profession as a whole will embrace new initiatives, and I'd love to feel that those voices are listened to.
Thank you. Colleen, same question to you.
Libby just says it so very well, and I really love the stool analogy. But the other piece I would add is as that third leg on the stool, that is the child. It's different for them all the way from young to middle to secondary, and how we support as a parent. Our voice has to be so much stronger at different times. So just to recognize that growing change of how they learn to advocate for themselves over time is important and needs support.
Fantastic, thank you. Following a similar theme, a final takeaway. I'll come to you next, Delilah. One thing you would like to people in schools to know in how they can best support children and young people with rheumatic condition.
Thank you. I would say providing an environment of acceptance of these changes, and that obviously children with and young people with these conditions will experience something different to other children, but there must be this environment of acceptance, no judging, that the children don't feel judged by what they're having or they're going through, and that they feel involved too, that they can participate and be part of the school and the activities, despite how they're feeling and the situation, the condition, that they find their ways to including the children, not to isolate them. I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. And Luciana, would you like to give your final takeaway message?
My message is to parents. So you don't need to be by yourself. Ask for help, ask for support. We have like a great support places and materials, and so you make your own support network. So if it's Facebook group, if it's a foundation, if it's, ask for help. You don't need to be by yourself facing any chronic disease. So this is my advice.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to give before we close, I'm going to give the last two responses to Beatrice and then Sophie. What would you like as your final sort of 30 seconds on the webinar? What would you like to share with the people watching about what it's like to be a young person with a chronic condition? What would you like them to know? What was the most effective thing they could do? Your one thing you'd like people to know that perhaps we haven't covered already. Beatrice first.
I would say respect is the biggest thing. At the end of the day, we will all find our own motivation and where we want to go. It might not necessarily be something that all of our teachers agree with, but it is like, we know at that moment what is right for us. And if you respect it, it's more likely that we will be able to communicate more easily about our feelings and about our limitations, basically. I think that's one of the biggest I can say.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Beatrice. It's about, respect and trust. No matter how old someone is, they are the expert of their own condition. They know how they are feeling on any particular day. And I think, it's just having that trust and respect with them, and being flexible, knowing that every single day is going to be different. Each month will be different. Each year will be different. And having that, that empathy and that flexibility. You're not going to regret being kind to someone, but if you have an unkind comment, then that will stay with them for a long time. I think, just be nice to people.
That's brilliant. Thank you. As a final takeaway, be nice to people. I like that. Thank you all for watching and joining us this morning, this evening, tonight, wherever you are in the world. And thank you to our panelists. We've had a few people asking where they can get a copy of the poem from. We will share that on the WordDay social media, or if you email contribute@wordday.org, we'll make sure that gets out to you. But if you keep an eye on our Twitter feed, we'll make sure that a link is put up in the next few days. All that remains to say is thank you hugely to everyone for taking part, for our moderators, Sammy and Catherine, all our panelists, everyone who's watching wherever you are, and also to Coralie, who's been working behind the scenes, making sure the tech works. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I say thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.